Hi guys, welcome to this video on Capture Recapture. So we know this is going to be in paper 2, we know you're going to have a calculator for it, so it will make you get the marks a lot more likely. You'll be much better prepared now we know it's going to be a calculator. So I'm just going to kind of reintroduce you to the basics of Capture Recapture, just to remind you what it's all about. So I've got a question here. If I told you that half of the fish in a pond had a mark on them, and I caught a net full of these fish, what would you expect the proportion of marked fish in the net to be? Now, if half of the fish, or 1 out of 2 fish, or 50% of the fish have got a mark on them, it would be reasonable if all the fish are swimming around, they're all mixed up, and you just take a random selection of them, you'd probably expect, or you would expect, half to have a mark. If I change that question ever so slightly and said there are 100 fish in a pond and 50 had a mark on them, and again I caught that net full, what would you expect the proportion of marked fish in the net to be? Now, these two statements, they're pretty much the same. The only difference is I've specified the actual numbers. But we can see I've got 50 out of 100 fish that are marked. Or that would be 1/2. Half of the fish are marked. We've just said up here, well, we'd expect half of the fish in the net to be marked as well. So we're just looking at that equivalence here, and we're going to be a bit more specific in a moment. And finally, adapting the question a little bit more, if I told you that there were 100 fish in a pond and 50 of them had a mark on them, and I caught 30 of those fish at random, what would you expect the proportion of marked fish in the net to be? So I could go even further with this. So again, I would be expecting, because I've got 50 out of 100 fish that are marked, I'd expect half of my fish to have a mark on them. So if I've got half of these 30 fish, which I'd expect to have a mark on them, I'd be wanting to find half of 30, which we know is 15. So really, this is just the same question 3 times. I'm just giving you a little bit more information each time, being a little bit more specific about the numbers. But that is the basic idea of Capture Recapture. So in general, we can assume that the proportion of marked fish in a pond will be the same as the proportion of marked fish in the net. So instead of saying same, we could say they're just going to be equal. Just as a bit of a disclaimer here, it's such a common question to be asked about fish in a lake or a pond. That is what I will be referring to for the majority of the video. Obviously it could be used in other contexts, but it's just easier, it's the most likely example to come up. So let's just think what I mean by these two quantities, the proportion of marked fish in the pond and the proportion of marked fish in the net. So the proportion of marked fish in the pond is going to be the number of fish in the pond with a mark out of the number of fish in the pond in total. Okay, it's a proportion, it's not a ratio, so you know this will always be smaller or equal to this bottom number. There can't possibly be more fish in the pond with a mark than there are fish in the pond in total. And the proportion of marked fish in the net, well again, the only thing that's different between these two statements is the word pond has changed to net. It's going to be the same thing with my definition, with actually what that proportion is. So it's going to be the number of fish in the net with a mark out of the number of fish in the net altogether. Okay, so we would expect those two proportions to be exactly the same. And in maths, when two things are exactly the same, we can just put an equal sign between them. So in general, and this might be something you do want to make a note of, we can equate these two quantities, these two proportions. So the number of fish in the pond with a mark, bit of a mouthful, bit of a while to write, out of the number of fish in the pond is going to be equal to the number of fish in the net with a mark out of the number of fish in the net. Okay, so we're going to be looking at some examples of these questions just in a moment. I'm just going to get some different colour pens to make it a little bit easier. But I can tell you already the three quantities you are going to be given in an exam. It's going to be this one, and this one. It's all about finding this bottom number. That is the whole point of Capture Recapture. I know I introduced it a little bit backwards and I told you how many fish are in the pond, but that was just to really get you thinking about the proportions. So we're going to keep this in mind. And we're just going to look at this first question. So I've just written this myself, but it is the type of thing that will come up in an exam. Okay, I've just slightly changed the numbers from some previous exam questions. So Hannah wants to estimate how many fish are in a lake. She catches 50 fish, marks them with a harmless die and returns them to the lake. The next day she catches 60 fish and she finds that 10 are marked. Estimate how many fish are in the lake. So I'm just going to put down all of the information I know. So it would probably help in an exam, just to help focus your mind, to write down what I had on the previous page. But fish in pond with a mark. Biggest downside is it takes a little while to write. Out of fish in pond is going to be equal to fish in net with a mark out of fish in net. Now the reason I set it up like this is because what she does on day 1 refers to just the number of fish in the pond. What she does on day 2 just refers to the number of fish she's got in her net. So I always make sure I set mine out like that. So what I'm just going to do, now I've got this written down and we need to memorise that, I'm just going to plug in the information that I know. So I know that on the first day she catches 50 fish and she marks them. So we know the number of fish in a pond with a mark is going to be 50. Now we don't know how many fish at the moment are in the pond. So we could just call that any letter we want. I'm just going to call it N for number of fish. Okay, so I've just plugged in 2 different values into this equation here. There's 50 fish in the pond with a mark, and there are N fish in the pond. Now we're going to think, well, how many fish are going to be in her net on the next day? And how many of them have a mark? So we can see that 10 of them in her net have got a mark. So 10 out of 60 have got a mark. So because we've said that these two quantities are equal, we can use our knowledge of equivalent fractions here. So we know that for these two to be equal, whatever has happened to the top must also have happened to the bottom. So what I will always do is consider the side of my equation that I know both bits of information. I know the fish in the net with a mark and the number of fish in the net. I don't know the number of fish with a mark and the number of fish in the pond. So the side that I've got both numbers I'm going to start with. And I'm going to think, what did I do to 10 to turn it into 50? Well, I think we can see I've multiplied it by 5. So that means I must have done, or I need to do, exactly the same thing to this 60 to get my N. I need to multiply it by 5. So my N is going to be equal to 60 multiplied by 5, which is going to be 300. Oh, can't write. 300. So actually, this is quite nice because you can double check that it makes sense. So I'm saying there are going to be 300 fish in the pond. So I know that 1/6, or 10 out of 60 fish have got a mark in them. So that means I'd expect 1/6, 10 out of 60 fish in the pond are going to have a mark on them. 50 is 1/6 of 300. Okay, don't worry too much about that last point. If you find it a little bit hard, just remember these steps and this will get you marks. Okay, because we know it's a calculator exam, it's likely the numbers might be a little bit hard, but there's nothing to worry about. So I've mixed it up a little bit. We've gone for bees in a hive. So Neve wants to estimate how many bees are in a hive. She catches 72 bees, puts a mark on them using a harmless dye, and returns them all to the hive. The next day she catches 90 bees and she finds that 20 are marked. Estimate the number of bees in the hive. So again, start this off exactly how I did with the fish. So the bees in the hive with a mark, out of bees in the hive is going to be equal to the number of bees in the net with a mark. Not sure if you catch bees in the net, don't know what you would use though. Is going to be equal to this quantity on the left. So what I'm going to do then is plug in what I know. So I know, because she's caught those 72 bees and she's put a mark on all of them, there are 72 bees in that hive with a mark on. And I don't know how many bees are in the hive, so again I'm just going to call that N. Now, how many bees are in the net with a mark? Well, 20 of them. So 20 out of the 90 bees have got a mark. These two quantities are equal. So if we think about what I did up here, I had to think, how do I turn 10 into 50? Well, that was quite easy to see. I multiplied by 5. Now, we've run into a bit of a difficulty. If that number here had been 40 or 60 or 100 maybe, it would be a lot easier to find out what I need to multiply it by. But because this is a calculator exam, there's no need to worry. We can still find out what I need to multiply 20 by to make 72. So what you're going to want to do, maybe just make a little note to the side, the scale factor is going to be equal to 72 divided by 20. So you're just going to do that on your calculator. 72, oh, bit of glare there, divided by 20 gives you 3.6. So what that is saying is you need to multiply 20 by 3.6 to get 72. So you must do exactly the same to the bottom. So I'm going to do it on my calculator to find the number of bees. I'm going to do 90 multiplied by 3.6 and I get 324. Okay, so I'm just going to show my working there. You might want to pause the video and make some notes. But we can see, whilst I didn't need to do this with my previous example, it would have worked. To find the number I need to multiply 10 by. To get 50, I would do 50 divided by 10. And that gives me 5. I need to multiply by 5. Here I did 72 divided by 20 to tell me I need to multiply by 3.6. So because it's in a calculator exam, I'm expecting the question to maybe look a little bit more like the one about the bees. It could well be a nice simple one. We don't especially need the calculator, but we need to prepare for the worst. Although to be honest, sorry guys, I'm not sure what happened there. I had a little bit of a technical issue, but you didn't really miss much of what I was saying. What I've got then is an adapted example for you to have a go at. So what would be a good idea is if you just pause the video now and have a go at these two questions following the steps that I laid out in the previous part. So pause the video now and I'm going to go through the answers. Okay, so we're going to do Hannah and the fish in the lake. So we know that the fish in the lake marked out of fish in the lake altogether is going to be equal to the number of fish in her net marked out of fish in her net. Okay, so just jotting that down was probably going to help focus your mind in an exam. So let's just plug in the information I know. So 35 fish were caught from the lake and they are marked. So I know there are 35 fish in the lake that have got a mark. I don't know how many fish are in the lake, there are N, but I do know that the next day when she returns, she gets 7 fish in her net that are marked. And we know that she caught 90. So I need to think, how do I turn 7 into 35? Well, I know my 7 times table, or I could use that calculator method, but I would see I need to times it by 5. So you would need to again, use calculator, it is there, don't make your life harder. 90 multiplied by 5 to give you 450. So you would expect 450 fish to be in that lake. Let's go to Neve and the bees. So she wants to estimate how many bees are in a hive. She catches 70 bees. Oh, lost a bit of focus there. She catches 70 bees, puts a mark on them all using a harmless dye and returns them to the hive. The next day she catches 90 bees and she finds that 40 are marked. Estimate the number of bees in the hive. So, marked bees in the hive out of bees in the hive is going to be equal to marked bees in the net out of bees in the net. These two proportions are going to be equal. So I'm just going to plug in the information I know. So 70 bees have been caught and they've been returned to the hive. So 70 bees in that hive are marked. 70 out of N bees. I could use B for B. And we know that proportion is going to be equal to the marked bees in the net out of bees in the net in total. So 40 bees in that net are marked out of 90 bees. 40 out of 90. Now if that had been 80, it would have been nice and straightforward number to multiply by, but it's not. I don't know exactly what I need to multiply 40 by to make 70, so I'm going to work out what my scale factor is. I'm going to do 70 divided by 40, which gives me 1.75. So what that is saying is to turn 40 in 70, I times it by 1.75. Let's just double check that. Times by 40 gives me 70. So my scale factor is 1.75. Oh, can't draw an arrow, that's handy. So I need to do exactly the same to the top as I did to the bottom. I'm going to multiply by 1.75. So just type that into my calculator. 90 times 1.75 equals 157.5. Okay, I should have checked beforehand. I made a slight mistake with the numbers. So you wouldn't be given one where you would have decimals. That's completely a mistake on my part, guys. If that did happen, you would simply round. Okay, so n equals 90 times 1.75, which equals 157.5. Just use a bit of sense. You're not going to have half the b, so we're just going to round that to 158. But if you go through those steps, you would pick up all the marks anyway. So that's completely my fault. I made a slight mistake with the numbers beforehand. I thought I was going to get a nice answer. Turns out that I didn't. So hopefully that has really helped you get your head around capture, recapture. Just remember, this step here or here is going to make the difference. It also shows the examiner you know what you are doing. If you've got any questions, please do let me know. But I hope this has been helpful. There will be a video uploaded shortly going through the second part of capture recapture questions, which is really valuable in picking up marks. See you later, guys.